tune. It's one of the most popular pieces ever written for the double bass. It's been recorded many, many times, and it's been included on the syllabus for several exam boards. So for many people, it'll be their first introduction to Bottesini, this wonderful composer who wrote so much beautiful music for us to play on the double bass. So it was a bit puzzling that when I researched for my biography of Bottesini, I never found a single reference to him playing Reverie himself. And I looked at over 10,000 mentions of him in various contemporary publications. And it's just about the only one of his solo double bass pieces that isn't represented in the collection of manuscripts that he left behind in the library at Parma Conservatory. And here's another thing, listen to this. That's Tom Martin's beautiful recording of Reverie, but he's playing it in a completely different key. He's playing it fourth higher than everybody else. Well, there's hardly anybody knows more about Bottesini than Tom, so he must have a good reason for doing it. So I thought this needed a bit of investigation. Is this piece really by Bottesini? Where does it come from? If it is by him, why didn't he play it? And why didn't he keep a copy of it in his library? Are we playing it right? Join me on a Reverie rabbit hole, if you will, and I'll try and answer some of these questions.
So the starting point for my research was the Internet Culturale site, where you can see all the manuscripts of Bottesini that are held at the library in Parma Conservatory. So there's no copy of Reverie there, but I was really interested to find there's two manuscripts of a song called Quando, cadran, foglie, which has the same tune. It's a bit shorter, it's only about 24 bars long. But anyway, I had a good look at these manuscripts. One of them's got a sketch with a different ending, pencil for piano, and the other one has written at the top, Quando, cadran, foglie, romanza in the key of G for singer and piano, although it's actually in F sharp minor. The song's been recorded beautifully by Yuko Murakami and Raffaele Cortesi. At the end of the manuscript there's some illegible scribble, but you can see that it says Per Emma, and it's dated the 6th of March 1879, Napoli, which is where Bottesini lived when he wasn't on tour after he returned from Cairo in 1877. He lived alone. In 1878 he had finally married his partner of 26 years, the opera singer Claudina Fiorentini, in Geneva. But she'd gone back to Cairo to deal with the menagerie that they had kept at their house there, and she never came back. So perhaps Emma was a new lady in Bottesini's life. Who knows? Now I think if you're going to understand this piece, we'd better have a look at the words. So here they are. It's a really beautiful poem, and I did a bit of research on them to find out where they come from. It turns out they were first published in a book called Postuma, which was the hit poetry book of the day. I don't think we really have those anymore. It was purportedly a posthumous collection of the poems of one Lorenzo Stecchetti, who had supposedly died of tuberculosis aged 30. But that was really a pseudonym for a poet called Olindo Guerini, who didn't actually die until 1916. His poems were all the rage and were later set to music by composers such as Leoncavallo, Busoni, and Bottesini's friend Paolo Tosti. Bottesini's song was accepted for publication by what was and still is the most important Italian publishing house, Ricordi. The composer and the publishers had a long up and down relationship, but after the success of Bottesini's opera, Eroe Leandro, early in 1879, they were on very good terms at this particular time. Now, Maestro Cortesi told me that he recorded it from a piece of sheet music published by Ricordi, but I found out that Quando, cadran le foglie was also published in a ladies' magazine, a magazine for Italian ladies that came out weekly called Margherita, published in Milan from 1878. They'd already published a section of Eroe Leandro arranged for piano. And Bottesini's song was published under the name La Nostra Canzone, which means our song. And that's a bit confusing because it's a completely different song with that name amongst Bottesini's manuscripts, written on the 14th of March, about a week after Quando, cadran le foglie. It's very confusing that Bottesini often used the same title for different pieces or different titles for the same piece. This one uses a different stacchetti poem which starts Un organetto suona per la via.
So Bottesini had already written the tune by 1879. So when did it become the piece we know as Reverie?
Well, the first mention of that title that I have found comes in a letter of the 18th of May 1886, when the bass player wrote to Carlo Dormville, who not only wrote the words for many operas, but had also been the stage director in Cairo when Bottesini conducted the premiere of Aida. In the letter, Bottesini says, "They have performed a reverie of mine at the first concert of the Quartet Society at La Scala. Having never heard a single line, either good or bad, I suppose it has passed unnoticed, if not whistled. But if it had been, all the press would have let me know with great satisfaction." Bottesini's Reverie was first published in the 1880s in Nice in the south of France by the editor Paul de Courcelles as a piece for cello and piano. Here's a copy of a de Courcelles edition which I found in the library of the Royal College of Music in London. You can see at the top that it was dedicated to Mon ami Oudshorn, my friend Oudshorn. Anton, or Antoine Oudshorn, was a Flemish cellist who was principal of the orchestra in Monte Carlo. Here he is with his fellow members of the Schwedele Quartet. Oudshorn was a composer as well as a cellist, and he produced a large number of cello pieces for the publisher de Courcelles, advertised as extracted from the repertoire of Monte Carlo. He had known Bottesini for many years. The great bass player always enjoyed spending time in places that had casinos, and Bottesini stayed in Monte Carlo for the first few months of 1870, while his new one-act opera, Vinciguerra, the Bandit, was being rehearsed and premiered at the theatre there. On March the 9th, 1870, Bottesini and Oudshorn gave a concert at the casino in Monte Carlo, together with the pianist Alfred Jael and his wife, and a baritone named Cresci. Bottesini's wife, Claudina Fiorentini, was also supposed to perform, but she was indisposed. In that concert, Bottesini performed his Fantasia on Bellini's Puritani, which had been at one point a duo for cello and bass, but on this occasion he seems to have performed the version for solo bass. He also played his Tarantella, which the public would have recognised because Bottesini had used it as the dance that the three principals took part in at the climax of his operetta. And after a Schubert nocturne for cello and bass, Oudshorn played his solo spot, which included a performance of a touching elegy by Bottesini. Now, it's quite possible that this was the first performance of Reverie, because Bottesini often changed the titles of his compositions. He wrote at least 3 other elegies, which all went under different names at different times, such as Romanza senza parole, Melodia, Romanza patetica, or Romanza drammatica. An elegy is a poem about someone who has died. We've already seen that Bottesini eventually set exactly such a poem to the music of Reverie. But it's also possible that in the concert in 1870, Oudshorn played Bottesini's most famous elegy, which had been published the previous year in his method. Bottesini returned to perform in the French Riviera in 1885, round about the time that Paul de Courcelles was starting to publish Oudshorn's many cello pieces. So it could have been at that time that Bottesini adapted the song Quando, cadran le foglie as a cello piece and named it Reverie. As usual with salon music, it was printed in several versions to maximise the publisher's income. As well as the version for cello and string quintet, which was probably the version performed at the Quartet Society in Milan, you could buy a version where the cello was accompanied by a piano and there was an arrangement for piano solo. And instead of a solo cello, you could play it on the violin. The violin edition was made by Achille Simonetti, who toured the UK and Ireland with Bottesini in 1887, playing the Granduro Concertante, among other pieces. He had also played with Oudshorn in Nice. Now you might notice that for some reason Simonetti changed the rhythm in the third bar of the solo to make it more like the first bar. I hesitate to say it, but I do think it is an improvement on the rhythm Bottesini had written to accommodate Tocchetti's poem. And certainly everybody since has used Simonetti's rhythm. The Reverie became quite successful as a cello or violin solo during Bottesini's lifetime, but there is no record of Bottesini himself playing it. The violin and cello versions were both in A minor and used the same piano part, but on the part I found in the Royal College of Music, the version for double bass is listed separately. At first I thought that it was maybe because that version was in a different key, but then I found this other image of a copy of the piano version of Reverie in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Now, it's not a great image, but you can see from this that there was originally no version for double bass. And I did a bit of detective work, which is quite clever, though I say so myself. We can date these two different copies of Reverie by the name of the London agents of the publisher. The Paris copy says that Paul de Courcelles was represented in London by Pitt and Hatzfeld, a firm which only existed between 1888 and 1895. And by the time the Royal College of Music copy was printed, they had amalgamated with another firm to become Stanley, Lucas, Weber, Pitt and Hatzfeld. So this copy must date from after 1895. And remember, Bottesini died in 1889. So it looks as though it was after his death that de Courcelles realised quite correctly that a double bass version of Reverie would be popular. Now I haven't tracked down a copy of the original double bass edition published by de Courcelles yet. Please get in touch if you know of one, but I have found this catalogue which indicates that de Courcelles' double bass edition was arranged by Bushman. And here is an American edition of L. Bushman's arrangement that I found in the Fred Zimmerman collection in New York Public Library, published in New York in 1900 by Carl Fischer. Louis, or Ludwig Bushman, was a bass player from Hamburg who also contributed a piece called Albumblatt to one of Simandel's collections. You can see that this version is written in G minor for a bass in solo tuning, so it's in A minor, just like the original cello and violin version. But it's low down, starting below written middle C. And you can tell from the fours in the fingerings that you're expected to start at the bottom of the G string rather than play it an octave higher in thumb position. Bottesini could never have played it like this because it goes below the range of his three-string bass. On the piano part, somebody has written transposed to D minor. And the Fred Zimmerman collection also includes this handwritten part, where someone has done exactly that. Here we have the Bottesini Reverie transposed into the familiar key, probably for the first time. It's credited to the great Herman Reinshagen, who played in the New York Phil and taught many players at the Juilliard School, including his successor Fred Zimmerman, before moving to Los Angeles, where he continued to teach many more players, including all-time greats Charles Mingus and Gary Karr. He's the same man who gave us that wonderful transcription of Paganini's Moses Variations. Gary Karr has confirmed to me that this is all Reinshagen's handwriting. So it was Reinshagen who transposed Reverie into D minor, and that's the version most of us grew up with. Tom Martin pointed out to me that International Music Corporation used to credit him as the editor of their version of Reverie, until at some point they changed the credit to Fred Zimmerman. They didn't make any changes. The editions are identical. But as Herman Reinshagen died in 1944, his version would now be out of copyright. But Zimmerman didn't die until 1966, so any arrangements made by him still have a few years to go. Publishers, eh?
So what about that Tom Martin recording? Well, Tom told me, as he'd never seen a manuscript by Bottesini with it written in D minor, he decided to record it in the original published key, A minor. And why not? Because it works really beautifully on that key. In some ways, it lies even nicer that way than it does when we play it in D minor. And Tom pointed out, if you play it in that key, it has the same top note as Elegy, this top E.
And when we looked through Tom's enormous collection of sheet music, we realised that he wasn't the first person to have this idea. We found this image of a transcription of Reverie made in 1895 by Angelo Francesco Cuneo, the double bass professor in Turin. He keeps Bottesini's original key and original rhythm in bar 3. This may be the earliest transcription for double bass of Reverie.
So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the somewhat convoluted history of Bottesini's Reverie. It's one of the most beautiful pieces for double bass, but Bottesini didn't write it for that instrument, and that's why he never played it. And that means you can enjoy playing it in any key you like. In D minor, like Zimmerman and Reinshagen, or in high G minor, like Tom Martin. Or maybe you'd like to play it in low G minor, like Ludwig Buschmann. Bye for now.